Hi there and welcome back to the channel. My name's Joe Gardner, and in this series of videos I'm hopefully going to help you go from an absolute novice on the lathe to, by the end of these series of videos, being able to machine anything you want to do. So in today's video we're going to talk about turning down stock. So this is the fourth video in this series, and previous to this we covered off what the lathe is, tooling and facing off. So hopefully after watching the last video you went away and you practiced facing off. Now that you're comfortable facing off the ends of material, we need to start thinking about turning them down to a diameter that suits our needs. Let's walk over now to the old trusty bench where we'll look more about turning down stock and why you need to do it. Right, let's take a look at my first project on the lathe and see what was involved in turning down this bit of 40mm 304 stainless steel down to what we have here, Luke Skywalker's model lightsaber. So this originally started as one of these, and by turning down the overall outer diameter and turning down different segments, I ended up with this beautiful looking replica lightsaber. So before you think about even attempting a project like this yourself, we need to just go through the basics in turning down. And to do that, I think we'll head straight over to the lathe now, so I can show you exactly how to turn down material from this to get to something a little bit like this. And as always guys, if you're finding this content that I'm putting out really helpful to you at the minute, please subscribe and just drop a thumbs up. But for now, let's head over to the lathe. Right, so we're ready to turn down our stock for the first time. Before we do that, I just want to quickly go through some terminology and the basic procedure in turning down this. So to start with, let's talk terminology. One of the common things you're going to hear on YouTube and need to know about is feed rate. So feed rate is what we refer to when we're turning the hand wheel on the carriage to get this movement of moving the carriage backwards and forwards. If you imagine you're turning down this bit of material and you're cranking this hand wheel really quickly, that would be a fast feed rate. Generally, when you do a fast feed rate, you're not going to get the best finish, so just bear that in mind when thinking about feed rate. Second bit of terminology, which you'll hear quite a lot on YouTube, is depth of cut. Now the depth of cut we refer to in this instance as how much you're turning the cross slide. On all your dials you should have some kind of reference to how much depth of cut they're doing. So each segment down here is 0.05 millimeters, as you can see on the hand wheel just there, and a full rotation of this is 2 millimeters. So just to make sure that you're clear on this, just get familiar with your hand wheels. Mine, for example, will take 2 millimeters off the whole diameter of the part, where some hand wheels might only show one side, so just be careful you know exactly what you're dealing with there. So now we've covered feed rate and depth of cut, I'm just going to quickly run through the procedure with you before we start taking off some material. So unlike facing off, we're not going to be locking our carriage down here, we're going to be allowing the carriage to move backwards and forwards freely. But it is very similar to facing off, so for the first pass we want to just touch off on our material and wind the carriage back, and once we're touched off we're just going to do a very light skim pass over this just to make sure there's no high spots. Once we've figured out that there's no high spots on here, then we can dial in a little bit of depth of cut and take our first good pass. So I'm setting my lathe to 700 RPM. I'm just going to come forward and just touch off on the work. Once I can hear that noise, I know I'm touched off on the work. I'm then going to wind out a little bit till I'm all the way on the end here. I'm now going to very slowly use my carriage hand wheel and just move my tool piece along the workpiece and just do our first pass. When you do this for the first time, don't expect to get any chips or many chips at all, just because we're just doing a skim pass just to make sure there's no high spots on our workpiece. given that this is round stock and it's quite good condition, the likelihood is we're going to have no high spots, but it's always best just to make sure. Well, I've got about halfway along there and I'm happy that there's no high spots. So I'm going to wind my workpiece back, and now I'm going to dial in a depth of cut. So I'm going to dial in 0.2 of a millimetre. So that's going to take off 0.1 this side and 0.1 that side. Right, I think we're ready. Let's do our first cut. So just going really slowly with the hand wheel. So this bit of metal that I'm using is just mild steel. It doesn't machine brilliantly, but it's really good just to practice once you've had a go on aluminium or brass. Well, I'm going to stop there, I'm going to wind back. Right, and that's our first pass done. So I think what I'm going to do now, I'm going to just move my workpiece in a little bit so I've not got as much stick out. Because if you remember from the first video, I said the diameter times 3 is what you're allowed on stick out. Anything less than that is great. So if we move this in a little bit, we should get a little bit less chatter. So I've just come back and started again because I found I was getting a bit of a poor finish. If you find yourself getting a little bit of a poor finish as well, don't be afraid just to up the RPM and see how that affects it. So I've actually upped it now to 900 RPM and I've slightly increased my depth of cut, and the finish that I'm getting is a lot better. So we'll go again. This is 900 RPM and I'm doing 0.75mm of cut. Let's give that a go. So that's a much better finish on there. So yeah, that's basically the general rule of turning down stock. A few little pointers like I just said there. If you find yourself not getting the best finish, try upping your RPM and slowing your feed rate down. Another really good thing to get into the habit of while you're still practicing is set yourself a target. So this is an M20 bit of bar. Say for example, I wanted to machine that down to M16. Try machining that down and getting as close as possible to M16. Even if you're just using something as basic as a ruler, it'll give you a good idea to know how close you are to getting it to the final dimensions that you want. But yeah, that's basically all there is to turning down. It's quite simple and it's something that you'll get better with the more and more times you do it. Right then, that's all for this one, guys. I hope that's gave you a basic idea of how to turn down stock and the procedure that's involved. If you need any more info, don't be afraid to drop a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Stay tuned because in part 5 I'm going to be going through drilling and tail support on the lathe. But for now, that's all. Please subscribe and watch the rest of the series if you haven't already. Who knows, it might help you out with something. But that is it for today and I'll see you in the next one, guys.